Hey there, welcome back to the vlog. Today I'm going to do part 2 of the series of how we're building a certain application on different platforms. Today I'm going to cover the Android platform. So just as a quick heads up, this is going to be a sort of 30,000 feet up view. We are not going to go down any rabbit holes. I'm not going to get into anything in any depth really. If you saw the iOS version that we did previously, you'll have an idea as to what this is going to be. So for those that are just joining, what the basic idea is, we have a very simple application, a text box, a button and a label, and you enter some text in the text box, press the button, and we read the value from the text box, put it in the label. That's all it has to do. And the reason that we're doing it that simple is later I'm going to do a manual version of this in Win32, and given the amount of work that that's going to take, I didn't want to make this a very complicated app. So, you know, from this standpoint, it's just like, here's how you build an app. I'm not going to get into security, and I'm definitely not going to get into things like networking or anything like that. This is literally going to be, here's a bog standard app, this is how you build it, and then you've got an understanding as to how these things are put together. So, having said that, I'm going to quickly start up Android Studio. Now, Android Studio is the IDE of choice for most people. There are other ways that you can do it, using Eclipse or even using Visual Studio, or using some sort of cross-platform system. And I will cover some of those later at another date. But right now, we're just going to use Android Studio. I will give you a quick heads up. I'm running on a slightly older Mac here, and so Android Studio, because it's a bit of a resource hog, you will hear from time to time, and you can probably hear it right now, the fans are starting to spin up. This particular program, it's good at what it does, but it takes up a lot of memory, and it also takes up a lot of processing power and a lot of disk space. Anybody that's ever used Visual Studio will understand how much of a resource hog a big IDE can be, and Android Studio is absolutely no different. So, to start off with, we're going to create a new Android Studio project. I'm going to give it a name, so My Test App. The next thing we can do is we can create a company domain if need be. I'm just going to leave it as Coulls YouTube. That's not a real domain, just in case you're wondering. It's just something that I put in for demonstration purposes. And I'm going to give this a project location. Actually, yeah, it's fine where it is. I'm not going to worry with C++ or Kotlin support, so I'm just going to hit next. And we're just going to leave the default values. We just want phones. We don't want Wear TV or anything like that. So hit next again. And I'm going to go with the empty activity. Now, as a quick background for anybody that's never done Android before, in the traditional program architecture, you have a start point. That start point is normally called main or submain or function main. In the case of Windows, it would be winmain. There's normally a main place where you start. In the case of Android, you have this idea of you can sort of start in different places, and these things are done using activities. A good example of this would be the mail program. You can open the mail program and see your inbox of emails. That would be one activity. But the compose screen of the mail program, well, the compose screen would be a different activity, and there's absolutely no reason why one program can't say, oh, we're going to auto-populate an email, and I'm going to start at the compose activity, not the inbox activity. So, with that out of the way, I'm just going to pick a basic empty activity. So, click next. Okay, I'm going to leave it as main activity, and the layout name will be main activity, activity main. Now, for those who understand view controllers, basically you've got the name of the activity is like a namespace for both the view and the code behind, and then the layout name, that will be what it's referred to in the sort of storyboard equivalent, but we'll come to that in a second. So I'm just going to hit finish. One thing you will notice with Android Studio is it spends a lot of time just doing stuff. There is a lot that it tries to take on for you, and it's also pulling from many different places. Now, because I've run Android Studio on this computer before, I'm not going to run into a lot of the pop-ups and dialogues that you will. when you first install Android Studio, one of the things it does is it says it's installed, and then the minute you go to do something, it turns around and says, oh, actually, I don't have this thing that I need, and then it will spend another 10 minutes downloading something else and installing that. So, the first time you run Android Studio, you'll probably get quite annoyed at it for doing that, because literally everything you do seems to require another download, and it will go out about 5 or 6 times, downloading images for emulators, downloading SDKs, downloading like all sorts of stuff. So I'm just going to close this up. To quickly run you through what we've got here. On the left hand side we have our project structure, and on the right hand side we have our editor, and there's 2 tabs that it's already created for us. One is this XML file, and the other one is a Java file. I will come to those ones in a minute, but I'm just going to quickly run down this left hand side. At the top of this tree here we have this manifests. Inside there is one XML file, and this is like the main project configuration file that says to any phone running this application, here's what I am. Actually, let me open it up. Here's what I am. So I am this package. This is my name. This is my icon. This is the label that is shown underneath the icon. This is the theme that we're going to use. We then have the Java side, and underneath this we've got 2 test areas, and then we've actually got our activity, our main activity that we had created just a minute ago. Let me close down that other manifest there. Okay, so I will come back to this code in a second. We then have this res folder. This is very, very important. Res is short for resources, and in here you will find everything that the app needs in order to function. So for instance, under values, we have styles. This is what our style looks like. We have a primary color, a primary dark color, and a accent color. And those are defined in this colors XML. And we also have strings. And you can see here, there's one string called app name, and it's the name of our app. This is very, very handy for when you're doing things like translations into other languages. So, in your app, you will say, for instance, the top of the screen, put this app name. But then what will happen is it will say my test app in English, and it will say something else in French, German, Spanish, and whatever. We have this mipmap area, and this is where some of the other resources are. For instance, like here's the icon in high definition, medium definition, which is very grainy, the extra high definition, extra high, extra high. And this is one of the things that does get on my nerves sometimes about Android. It's so fractured with the different manufacturers and the different screen sizes and all the different variations. You end up with a lot of stuff being done over and over and over to accommodate all the possible permutations. Okay, so the next thing in here would be the layout. This is one of the areas where we will spend a lot of time in a minute. This file here is actually this tab up here. They're the same thing. So this is the user interface, and that's in the layout. We have drawable, which has some more XML in it. Like a lot of this stuff you're not going to play around in too much. So let me just close down the icons. Now, if I just quickly minimize the app, there is one last area, and that is the build area. I'm not going to cover building today. Just know that there is something called Gradle, and basically it goes and builds the stuff in the background so that every time it builds, there's a script that says this is how you build, this is what you need to do, this is what you need to include, if you're missing anything, this is where you get it from, and so forth. Right? So that is all done in these scripts here. So I'm going to just close those down. And now I'm going to go back to the app, and let's actually get building something. So the first thing we're going to do is go into our activity. And as you can see, when this activity starts, there is a package name at the top. There's 2 imports, and then there's a little bit of code that just basically says when this activity is created, so on create, go run this code, which is these 2 lines here. It doesn't do anything at the moment because there is no user interface, there's no functionality added to this activity. So having finished with the code, although we have this tab open at the top, I'm just going to sort of drill in where it is so you can find it again. You go into res, go into layout, here's our activity, double click, and now we're on this other tab that's up here. Now when you're looking at this is the user interface, but it's actually building this text file behind here. And so this basically is, one way of looking at this, and this is one way of looking at this. They're both the same thing, it's just that one's the visual representation, the other one's the actual code that it's generating that will be bundled in the app that will tell the app how to build this user interface. We have two screens. We have the light theme and the dark theme. They're exactly the same, other than the colors. So what I'm going to do is quickly drag from the text area. I'm going to pick a plain text box and I'm going to pull it down, and yeah, you can see it's a bit slow there. I'm just going to drop it here. I'm now going to find in widgets a button, and I'm going to put it here. As you can see, it's a little bit slow on my computer. Go back to text. Now I'm going to take a text view, which would be a label or a static or something like that if we were on a different operating system. Okay, let's just move this up a little bit. Now I'm not going to get into sizing or anything like that, but I'm just going to make this a little bit bigger. There are ways, just like on any other platform, to handle rotation and things like this, but I'm not going to get into those here. So I'm just going to knock out the text that's inside this. Now, I'm also going to give everything a name. This top edit text, I'm going to call text input, because that's where we're going to type something. The text that is in there at the moment, I'm going to take out. The button, I'm going to call it button press me, and I'm going to change the text to press me. The final thing I'm going to do is highlight this text view, and I'm going to call it LBL for label, because I want to try and keep consistent with what we did on the other platform. So LBL output, oops, can't spell. So LBL output, so the idea is we've got our input, we press the button, and this will be the output. Okay, so hopefully that's pretty simple. Now, if we look at the text behind this, we can see, so as you can see, we've got an edit text here. It's, it's called txt input, it's got a height, it's got some wrapping on it, and it's got some positioning and stuff. We then got the button, same type of stuff. We've then got the same for the text view. Now, remember that we have these values here, because these values will come up again in a minute. So that's the source code. So yeah, we can now pretty much finish as far as the user interface is concerned, I think. And we're going to go over to the code, which you can either come through here, or we've already got it open, so here it is here. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to get a reference to that button so that we can attach a method to it that will run when it's clicked. The way we're going to do this, I'm just going to create a variable, and it's going to be a, oops, I can't spell, it's going to be a button, and it's going to be called button press me, and we can find this button ID, and it was called button press me. Yep, there it is. Now what this is basically doing is we're calling this find view by ID, and we're looking in R, which is short for res, something with ID button press me, which if you remember back in here, it's this. This is what we're looking for here, and it will return that into this variable, which is a button, and it's a final variable. Not going to get into the Java side right now if you need to know what some of the keywords are in Java. But anyway, the point is we've gone and found the button. What we're now going to do is we're going to create a listener. So on click, set on click listener, and it's going to be a new view dot, oops, on click listener. There we go. Okay, so what we're now going to do is we're going to put the code inside here that will run. What this has basically done is it said, look, we're going to create a new listener, and this listener is going to have this function that runs when this listener detects that a click has happened on this button, which is the button that we got here. Hopefully that makes some sense. So the first thing I'm going to do is get a reference like we did here for the button. We're going to get a reference to the txt input and the LBL output. So final edit text txt input, and this is going to be find r.id.txt input. Now we're going to do the same for the output. So final. Now this one was a text view, which would be a static if it was on Windows in their UI system, or a label if you're used to .NET. So this is going to be LBL output, and this we're going to find r.id.lbl output. Okay, so now we have our two references to the user interface. If I go back to here, so this is txt input, this is LBL output, and now we can see these two variables are referencing those two items on the user interface. What we can now do is we can say string, oops, you know what, I'm just going to put a blank line here. So yeah, string my text is whatever the txt input get text. Now the odd thing about get text is it doesn't actually get the text. It does, but it's not a string. So we need to go to string. So now we've got whatever that text box, get the text that's in it, convert it to a string that we can use, stick it in the string here. Now I'm going to set the output to that string. So if I now go lbl output dot set text, and it's going to be set to my text. This will now do what we want. So I'm now going to run the debug version here. So this debug bug looking button up here, I'm going to run this. Okay, waiting for the Android debugger. Now the first thing it's going to come up with is we're not running anything, do we want to run one? Now I happen to have a virtual device installed. What you'll probably see the first time you run this is, do you want to install the device? And it will then install a default one, which is probably the same one I'm running here. So I'm just going to hit OK. So something to bear in mind with the emulator is it is slow to start off with, and if you don't give it enough memory to be able to launch properly, it will slow down even more, which is what I think is happening here. As I said, like, yeah, there are entire videos. You can spend weeks going through the you know, the ins and outs of the emulator and the IDE and everything. Okay, it looks like it's finally starting now. Okay, the app is launching. Come on. And the button's in the wrong place. Okay, let's go fix that. So in order to constrain these things, if we click on here, drag to the top. Okay, I'm going to say this needs to be 20 pixels down. Then this one we will drag to here. Oops, can I drag this to here? And now I'm going to say this needs to be 20 pixels down. Okay, and then this one, drag to here. Oops, drag to here. And we'll say this has to be 50 down. There we go. Right, so this should now constrain everything where it should be. Yeah, I had totally forgotten that they changed the way that this works. And so that's now the new way of doing it. You drag your stuff on there, but then you have to use these little circles to say, right, okay, this is in relation to this position-wise, and then you change, you know, whatever the distance is. So in this case, I had 20, 20, and 50. Okay, looks like we're about to get the user interface come up. And hopefully this time it's all where it should be and not squished up into the top left corner. Okay, alright, well it's still squished over to the left, but that's fine, I can live with that. So, I'm now going to type okay, press me. Okay, so that works. So we've taken, you know, whatever is up here. Oops, no, I don't want to suggest names. Hide. No, go away. This is why I don't like Android. So press me. Yay. Okay, so as you can see, it's doing what it should be doing. This is the very, very high overview, 30,000 feet up of... Really? So this is the very high overview of how Android works. As I said before, I'm not going to get into the specifics of it because you could literally have an entire channel dedicated to how to build in Android, and I'm sure there are thousands of channels out there that go over this. But I just wanted to, give you the high overview of how it's done. You've already seen how it was done under iOS. Now you've seen how to build something under Android. In the next version, we're going to go over to Windows, and I will build something on Windows. Now, the next one is the one that I'm really, really dreading because it's the Win32 version. So I'm going to build everything up from scratch, including the message pump and everything else. So anyway, that is it for here. I hope you found that one interesting. If you have any questions or comments, leave them down below. If you like these types of videos, please give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more, please hit subscribe, and speak to you soon. Thanks. Bye.